This week it's Robert E. Lee. Is it George Washington next week? You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
I think a lot of people have driven by these statues probably for decades and never thought twice about them.
It's about a small group of people on the left following in the footsteps of the Taliban. You start by tearing down statues and burning books, and eventually you go after people.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says the United States still open to negotiations with North Korea.
We continue to be interested in finding a way to get to dialogue, but that's up to him.
Terrorists in Afghanistan now demanding all U.S. forces get out of their country.
One thing that really stuck out to me, though, is they said, we're not really your problem, which some of my teammates and I have been saying for a long time. I don't think more troops is going to do anything unless you truly reinvade.
This is what it takes to get something approved today. This is what we will bring it down to.
The bureaucracy in the United States at this point always gets in the way and stalls major infrastructure. That's what the president wants to cut.
What happens when a bodybuilder catches a glimpse of himself in a security camera? The video? Priceless.
Speak for everybody here at Fox and Friends when I say we should just have that in that monitor for the rest of the show.
I want to book him as a guest.
We must.
Does he speak? Does he speak is the question, or does he just stare in the mirror?
Well, listen, the guy.
When you look like that,
you don't need
can
to
do whatever you want.
We have so many questions. So many questions.
Note to the bookers, let's try to find this man and interview him on an upcoming Fox and Friends to find out what he was thinking about posing for the surveillance camera at that convenience store.
Our producers just said, no, you're there on it. They're going to see if they can
That's what we like to hear.
Excellent.
You know, I love that he just kept going with it, though, you know? When you got it, you own it.
Absolutely.
Todd knows that well.
Newt Gingrich is going to be with us in just a minute or two, so strap yourself in to your couch,
Yes.
your curvy couch, wherever you are. In the meantime, time for some headlines.
Hey, Jillian.
I can't believe, Todd, you've become the butt of the jokes today. I'm sorry.
I mean, when you have a sad body like this, like a 12-year-old girl, you have to embrace it.
Okay, on that note, let's get you caught up on what you need to know at this hour, beginning with the Fox News alert. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says the United States is still open to negotiations with North Korea over its nuclear weapons program.
We continue to be interested in finding a way to get to dialogue, but that's up to him.
That comes as North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un declared he would hold off on a planned launch of missiles towards Guam. President Trump just tweeting, quote, Kim Jong-un of North Korea made a very wise and well-reasoned decision. The alternative would have been both catastrophic and unacceptable. This coming on the heels of a State Department report claiming the rogue regime tortures and even executes thousands of people for worshiping anyone or anything other than the North Korean government. A somber day ahead in Charlottesville, Virginia. Heather Heyer, the woman killed during violent riots last week, will be laid to rest. Heyer was protesting against white supremacists when she was hit by a car that was driven into a crowd. The 32-year-old was a Charlottesville native and worked as a legal assistant. 19 others were hurt in that attack. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani is recovering this morning after being rushed to the hospital. Giuliani undergoing emergency surgery on his leg after his knee gave way while on vacation. Giuliani telling the New York Post he suffers from catcher's knee after years of playing baseball. But his wife says he's in good spirits and is already working from his hospital bed. And speaking of baseball, a big salute to all those who fight for our freedoms. The Texas Rangers honoring 100 Purple Heart recipients on the baseball field before the Rangers took on the Detroit Tigers. Dozens of veterans lining up to receive their award as the crowd cheered them on. The Rangers were officially recognized as the first Purple Heart baseball club. Actually, a viewer, Mike, sent me a tweet about that this morning, just saying, did you see this story? And I was like, wow, that is an inspirational and amazing story.
Great stuff.
It really is. It really is powerful. Thank you, Jillian.
Thanks, Jillian.
All right, if you were watching the channel yesterday, you saw a rollicking, wild press conference in the foyer there at Trump Tower. The president comes out with his Secretary of Transportation and economic advisors as well. The president made a very big mistake yesterday. He thought all of the press pool there would want to talk about infrastructure. He was wrong. They wanted to talk about Charlottesville, and in particular, why he was so slow to condemn, as he did on Monday, the KKK, the neo-Nazis, and white supremacists. He was unapologetic yesterday. He doubled down and talked about how both sides have culpability in what happened in Charlottesville. Watch this.
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious and it was horrible. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is. Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt? What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news. That was a horrible day. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides. You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
So he's saying, in addition to the activists on both sides, there were people there, he says, who were there because they were not in support of changing the name of the park from Robert E. Lee Park to Emancipation Park and taking down these statues.
Well, I think that's right. I don't think everyone that was part of that on Saturday were evil people. I don't think they came to hurt someone. However, there were a lot of evil people there that were part of hate groups that should be called out. Neo-Nazis and white supremacists that wake up hating certain parts of this country and people every single morning. That should be condemned. That should be called out. And I think people were frustrated, including many members of the Republican Party, that the president didn't seem consistent in his messaging. On Monday, he came out with a very powerful statement. We're talking about uniting this country. We are all in this together. We do not represent this, and calling them out by name. Yesterday, it seemed to go off the rails a bit. It didn't calm the country the way that people were hoping for.
According to Axios, Abby, the president felt in the news coverage over the previous 48 hours that he was beaten up unfairly by the criticism. And so what he did yesterday was he was going to fight back campaign style, which has been very effective for him in the past.
Right. So if you are a fan of that style, and then many people elected him into office because of the way that he does talk and the way that he handles the media. You loved what happened yesterday. If you were on the other side of that, and many folks in the media go to these press conferences trying to find ways to tear him down, that's always going to be the case. But I do feel like there was an opportunity missed here by the president to bring this country together. Anytime there is a situation like this where people feel divided, they feel hurt, you're the commander-in-chief. You have a real responsibility to bring this country together, to unify, but to also just bring some calmness to it.
Well,
right?
I think he did that on Monday, though, when he specified, you know, the KKK, the white supremacists, the neo-Nazis. He said these are bigots and they're evil people. Then, on top of that, the president yesterday was talking about, for instance, in this particular event that started it all down there in Charlottesville, and that was the removal of the name of the Robert E. Lee statue and the park as well. The president was wondering, okay, it starts here. Where does this end? There you have a woman who put a strap around, and then that particular statue, I believe, in Durham, North Carolina, was toppled. She has been arrested, and now the police there are looking for anybody else who is involved. But in the meantime, the president's wondering, where does this end?
Where does it end? And this is happening across the country. I think we have video of another statue that was torn down last night in Baltimore. You can see it right there. As you mentioned, Steve, the president spoke about this yesterday in this press conference, and he made that very point. He asked the question, where does this end? Here he is.
You take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
And therein lies that question that we keep coming back to. I don't think anybody is going to say that slavery was anything but a horrible, horrible stain on our country. But many of these individuals that began our nation were slaveholders. And is it a slippery slope at this point? Do we start tearing down statues to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and so on?
And how do you move on as a country if you don't learn from those mistakes? If you just take a big pencil eraser and erase all of it? Laura Ingraham has been really outspoken about this particular debate. She talked to us about it yesterday on Fox and Friends. Here she is last night with her thoughts on what she thinks should happen.
I understand that there's this newfound outrage and level of offense that it has reached this fever pitch about these statues. I mean, I think a lot of people have driven by these statues probably for decades and never thought twice about them. But now they've become a political symbol. And if it's a symbol that represents the racist past or any vestige of a racist past of the South, then they're going to be able to say, well, then that has to go too. I don't know how far they want to take it. Maybe they'll take it to certain books that they think are offensive or certain speakers on college campuses who are offensive. I think we have to ask the question, what next? How are we going to heal as a nation, condemn that which is evil, and then come together as a country?
There's the key. Coming together as a country is so vital at this point.
Well, I mentioned earlier, what about how many signers of the Declaration of Independence were slave owners? And somebody emailed me about a third of them were. So what happens to them and their historical record going forward? I also saw something online that talked about, what about all the places in West Virginia named after Robert Byrd, who was U.S. Senator for decades out there, who was in his 20s a recruiter for the KKK, and I think he eventually rose up to Grand Cyclops or something like that in his local chapter. What happens to all those buildings in West Virginia with his name on? That is the debate apparently we are about to have.
And it's a very, very good question. And the debate will continue, so more on that coming up.
In the meantime, coming up, the special election to fill Attorney General Jeff Sessions' Senate seat, now heading to a runoff between Luther Strange and challenger Roy Moore down in Alabama. Judge Moore is going to join us coming up very shortly.
Plus, they're in the country illegally, so should illegal immigrants be allowed to practice the law? Got more on that. Stick with us.
President Trump is at Trump Tower right now, but a little later on today he's going to head back west to Bedminster this afternoon, about 50 miles from where we're sitting right now.
But first, protesters will be waiting to greet him when he leaves Trump Tower in New York City.
That's where we find David Lee Miller live for us this morning. David, what's the scene there?
Right now, things are very quiet. You might call this the morning after a very contentious news conference. But as of now, not a demonstrator in sight. The scene last night, though, was somewhat different. There were about 500 demonstrators out on the streets outside Trump Tower. The numbers kept down, possibly because of the bad weather. There was some heavy rain. There were about 500 anti-Trump protesters and a smaller number of pro-Trump protesters. 35-year-old man was arrested for punching a Trump supporter. He was charged with misdemeanor assault. Also, a 28-year-old woman was charged with disorderly conduct. Also on hand, the documentary filmmaker Michael Moore. After doing a live show on Broadway, he bussed in his audience members for a post-show protest. But as I reported moments ago, the crowds overall were significantly smaller than what we saw on Monday night. The president, he's already up a few minutes after 6 o'clock this morning. In fact, he sent out a tweet. It said, quoting now, Amazon is doing great damage to tax-paying retailers. Towns, cities, and states throughout the U.S. are being hurt. Many jobs are being lost. Now, Jeff Bezos is the CEO of Amazon. He is also the owner of the Washington Post, and that is a newspaper that President Trump has singled out for what he calls its unfair news coverage. The president also sent out another tweet this morning, guys, talking about Kim Jong-un and the situation in North Korea. He said that Kim Jong-un made a wise and reasoned decision. The alternative would have been catastrophic and unacceptable. Obviously addressing there the threat that was not followed up to fire missiles in the direction of Guam. And as you mentioned just a moment ago, we expect that the president is going to spend the next several hours here at Trump Tower, and then it's off to Bedminster, New Jersey, where he will resume there what is described as a working vacation. Back to you.
All right, David Lee Miller over on Fifth Avenue. We thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
So Trump Tower is the center of the Twitterverse this morning.
It is. No surprise there, though.
It's fascinating. The complete North Korea story lost in all the last 24 hours.
It's a huge one. It's a huge one.
It is indeed. Meanwhile, the special election down in Alabama to fill Attorney General Jeff Sessions' former Senate seat, heading to a runoff between Luther Strange and our next guest, Judge Roy Moore, joins us live from Alabama coming up.
And she got a once-in-a-lifetime chance to meet the vice president. But now she's the victim of online bullying because she posted this picture. A college student sounds off about her critics. It's coming up.
About 25 minutes after the hour. Back with some quick headlines. Texas bans taxpayer funding of abortion. Governor Greg Abbott tweeting this. New law signed to ensure no Texan is required to pay for a procedure that ends the life of an unborn child. The law applies to elective abortions through insurance plans and exempts medical emergencies to save the mother's life. Also this morning, a major drug company heading to court accused of profiting from the opioid crisis. South Carolina now suing Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, claiming that the company encouraged overprescribing and didn't go far enough to warn about overdose dangers. Steve?
Meanwhile, Abby, as part of his crackdown on sanctuary cities, Attorney General Jeff Sessions heading to Miami-Dade, Florida later today, highlighting that county's cooperation and the $500,000 in grants they will now receive.
Joining us now ahead of the Attorney General's remarks, Miami-Dade County Mayor Carlos Jimenez. Carlos, thank you so much for being here. Just give us a little bit of the history. You were a sanctuary, now not. Break that down for us.
That all started back in May of 2016 under the Obama administration. They labeled us a sanctuary city because we were not honoring detainer requests from the federal government. We made a change in policy in February where we are now honoring the detainer request. So we will hold somebody for 48 hours after their time is up in Miami-Dade County Jail, and if the ICE comes and picks them up, then they can pick them up. We always shared information with ICE. We've never considered ourselves a sanctuary city. So actually, this has gone through 2 different administrations as we're trying to fight the sanctuary city label to make us eligible to receive federal funding. And so that's really basically what's transpired.
Well, you're fighting the sanctuary city label to get the money. Are you a sanctuary city?
No, we're not. We never considered ourselves a sanctuary city. We always gave the information to all police agencies. When anybody is arrested in Miami-Dade County, they get fingerprinted, they get photographed, they're ID'd, and then all that information is sent out throughout the country. We always did that. We just didn't honor the 48-hour detainer request. Now we are honoring the 48-hour detainer request, and so that's why General Sessions feels that we are no longer a sanctuary city.
Yeah, This is a top priority for the Attorney General. He's going to be traveling to Miami-Dade and speak about this directly. We actually got a bit of what he's going to say to the show. I want to read some of this to you. He says, I know that Miami-Dade will be an example of the good that comes from following the law. We have already seen that. The same Independence Day weekend when Chicago suffered more than 100 shootings and 15 homicides. Miami-Dade also had a historic number of shooting deaths, 0. That's just a bit of what you're going to hear later on from the Attorney General. How important will his comments be?
Well, they're very important. I mean, I think our policy is the right policy. In terms of immigration, I hold different views on immigration. I'm an immigrant myself. But when it comes to when people are arrested here in Miami-Dade County to keep our citizens safe, we provide that information. We will hold and honor those detainer requests. And I think that's the right policy. Immigration is a very complex issue, and it's not black and white. There's a lot of shades of gray in it. And so, I hope to talk to the Attorney General when he comes down and then express my views on immigration as a whole, and also as how we cooperate here with our federal partners, and we are compliant with the law.
What would you say to other mayors who believe in the sanctuary city model and have come out, many have sued or threatened to sue the federal government, what would you say to them as an immigrant yourself?
Well, as an immigrant, the immigrants don't fit in one box, and so what we did here, these are people that have gotten arrested here in Miami-Dade County. Most of them, a vast majority of these that have been picked up by ICE actually are multiple offenders. Some are very, very serious offenses. And so, it's my job as a mayor to protect the citizens, all the citizens of Miami-Dade County.
Sure.
And when you really talk about it, we have we think there's about 150,000 undocumented immigrants here in Miami-Dade County. ICE has picked up maybe 185 of them. So you're talking about a very small fraction of people, of the undocumented that live here in Miami-Dade County. Most of the undocumented that live here in Miami-Dade County never have an encounter with police. They go about their business.
Right.
And so we are a welcoming community, but if you break the law, then you fit into another category, and you're susceptible to be picked up by ICE, and that's what we do. We comply with the law, and we think that's the right policy.
That is well said. Carlos Jimenez, good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Meanwhile, the special election to fill Attorney General Jeff Sessions' Senate seat down in Alabama heading to a runoff between Luther Strange, who we had on the program yesterday, and our next guest, Judge Roy Moore, who joins us live next.
Plus, they're in the country illegally, so should illegal immigrants be allowed to practice the law?
Can we vote? The race to fill Jeff Sessions, our Attorney General's now vacant Senate seat in Alabama, heading to a runoff. Former state Supreme Court Justice Judge Roy Moore to face current Senator Luther Strange, who was asked to fill in the term, who came in second despite an endorsement from President Trump.
And he joins us now on the heels of his very busy night, GOP Senate candidate Roy Moore. Good morning to you. Congratulations on what happened last night.
Good morning, Abby. Thank you very much. It was a great victory.
And to Luther Strange. I mean, you two are now going to go at it. What can we expect between now and Election Day?
Well, if it's like the past, you can expect Washington to be funneling millions of dollars into Alabama to win this race, despite what the people of Alabama want.
That's because you say that Luther Strange is the establishment candidate. That's why he's got the support of Mitch McConnell. What do you make of the fact that the President of the United States, however, Judge, went ahead and endorsed Mr. Strange rather than you?
Well, I can't help what they do behind doors in Washington, D.C. Of course, I support the President's agenda. I have supported him throughout, and I don't know why he did what he did, but that's his decision, not mine.
Judge Moore, having been in your great state yesterday and interviewing people on the eve, the morning of, I should say, of the election, the number one thing people said when they were referring to you is that you stood up for what you believed in. Can you sort of break down for those who may not live in Alabama and explain what they're referring to?
Well, the belief in traditional marriage, the belief in an acknowledgement of God as the source of our liberty and our government, these are the things I've stood up for, and I've suffered accordingly by the Judicial Inquiry Commission in Alabama. But I'll continue to uphold the Constitution and the right to acknowledge God.
And specifically, you were, if I'm not mistaken, kicked off the Supreme Court there for your refusal to tear down the Ten Commandments at a judicial building, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So the president has tweeted out about the race. He says, congratulations to Roy Moore and Luther Strange for being the final two and heading into a September runoff in Alabama. An exciting race as he ends that. You know, a lot of people watch from afar, sir, and they're probably thinking, why would anyone want to go into the Senate right now? I mean, it seems like it is complete gridlock. There's nothing that can get done. Why do you want to be senator?
That's exactly the reason I want to go to be senator, is because nothing's being done by the establishment. They're continually blocking everything that the president wants to do. I think I can move it. I think I understand, for example, that the filibuster rule is an unconstitutional rule. It's a supermajority rule not imposed on the people of this country by the founders, but upon the Senate itself.
All right, Judge Roy Moore, who is heading for the face-off with Luther Strange, who currently is holding that seat on a temporary basis. Judge, thank you very much for joining us live today. Good luck to you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate y'all having me.
We'll be watching it closely.
September
Good to have you.
26th is the big day.
It's a big day. All right, some more headlines we're following this morning. Good to see you, Jillian.
Good to see you guys, too, and to you at home. Let's begin with this. This mother is being hailed a hero for shielding her 2 toddlers and a baby from a massive tree that came crashing down. This happening in New York City Central Park, where witnesses say the tree landed on the family. Ann Goldman was knocked unconscious for several minutes. Good Samaritans rushed to pull the tree off of them. Goldman breaking her neck, but her children are expected to be okay. A frightening scene. The search is on for the vandal who spray painted obscene graffiti on the Lincoln Memorial. The National Park Service is working to remove the red paint without damaging the historic monument. This isn't the first time the monument has been targeted. Back in February, 4 memorials, including the Lincoln, were vandalized. They're in the country illegally, but the American Bar Association now demanding Congress allow illegal immigrants to practice law across the country. The move would permit an undocumented alien seeking legal status to obtain a professional license. If Congress were to say yes, it would still be up to the states. California, Florida, and New York already allow it. A college student is taking a stand after she was bullied on social media for posing for and posting a picture with Republican Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rogers and Vice President Mike Pence. Mackenzie Deutsch, the junior at California Scripps College, joined us earlier.
The point isn't about me and the fact that I was harassed over the photo. It's the larger picture, and it's reflective of a larger culture on college campuses, my campus and other places, I'm sure, of just an attitude people generally have towards people with dissenting views.
She also responded by writing an article on her experience as an intern in Washington, D.C., and the need for diversity of thought on college campuses. And I've got to say, she was very well spoken.
She was.
I was impressed.
But she was shocked because her that particular photograph was on Facebook, and she had her privacy settings to the point where only her friends or family could see it. And the criticism she got was from her. She thought they were her friends, and yet they turned out.
Isn't that amazing?
Maybe
She was so mature, and she talked about just having more respect in this country, regardless of what political side you affiliate with. When you're talking about the president or the vice president in a photo, let's have a little more respect, people.
Absolutely.
She was great.
Thank you very much, Jillian. All right, is it a bad hair day outside, Janice?
It's never for Janice.
I don't think so. Is it a bad hair day today?
A little bit.
I think your hair looks great. Where are you from?
Indiana.
And do you want to say hi to anybody at home?
I do. I want to say hi to my mom and my boyfriend and my grandparents and my little brother who is still at school today.
Oh my gosh. Well, congratulations. And I think we have some birthdays coming up. What about you?
Oh, yeah. Our parents, it's their 80th year, so we're here celebrating their birthdays.
That's fantastic. Are they up watching you right now?
No.
No, they're very smart, actually. I wish I was sleeping, too. Let's take a look at the maps real quick. It is a beautiful day in New York City. Don't you agree? Is it a beautiful day? Did I do okay? All right. That's what I want to hear across the Northeast and the Great Lakes. A little cooler, but I mean, the sun is out, and that's the most important thing. We do have the potential for showers and thunderstorms across the central U.S. today. Large hail, damaging winds, maybe an isolated tornado for folks across the central U.S. And then we're also watching, it is hurricane season, so we are watching Hurricane Gert off the coast. Does anyone surf? Does anyone surf around here? No? Where are you from, young lady?
Houston, Texas.
Houston! And here you here just vacationing?
Yes, I came here for a swim meet, and we're just on vacation now.
You love it so far? What's the highlight been?
Probably the 9/11 memorial.
Yeah. What about you? What was your highlight?
The 9/11 memorial is definitely special.
It is. It absolutely is. If you're here in New York City, do visit it. It's a big day in our history, and it's important for all of us to remember that. Are you guys excited that you're on Fox and Friends?
Yeah!
Right, back inside.
I love it.
That was the main point.
Thank you, Janice. Of course, most importantly. All right, still coming up on the show, Confederate statues coming down like dominoes, and our next guest says that Robert E. Lee would have wanted it that way.
Wait till you hear that. And where in the world is Elizabeth Warren? Not in Massachusetts with her constituents, but her Republican challenger is, and he's trying to track her down.
Some quick headlines, the solar eclipse edition. 2 Pennsylvania school districts are delaying their first day of school of classes due to safety risks of the solar eclipse. Those schools are urging kids to stay inside with their parents during the event to prevent any unsupervised viewing of the sun. And apparently, it's not just students, but drivers who could be at risk as well. Federal officials are worried the eclipse could be the biggest driving distraction of the century and are all working with 14 states directly in the eclipse path to help warn residents. It's coming. It's Monday. A total solar eclipse. I'm so excited. Are you excited?
Oh, I am thrilled. Cannot wait for it. Janice, you've warned us. Love it. All right, well, President Trump pushing back after protesters topple Confederate statues. Watch this.
So, this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
But our next guest argues that Robert E. Lee would have wanted his statue removed. Here to explain, National Review editor and Fox News contributor Rich Lowry. Good to have you with us, Rich.
Hi there.
Interesting perspective. So why would he have wanted his statue today to be gone?
Well, no one can know what Lee would have thought of this contemporary contention, but during his life, people repeatedly came to him and said, let's put up monuments, let's put up statues to the Confederacy, and he always said no, because he wanted to put the Civil War behind us and focus on national unity and moving ahead. And by the way, I do feel confident saying he would have been appalled by the mobs down there in Charlottesville who gathered around his statue when students at the University, Washington University, which he was president of and became Washington Lee, racist students tried to harass black kids. He would not stand for it and punish them.
Yesterday, the president said, okay, where does it end, though? They renamed it no longer Robert E. Lee Park. It's now Emancipation Park. Where does it end? He suggested, you know, what about George Washington?
Yeah.
What about Thomas Jefferson, who I think had 150 slaves?
Yeah.
What about Benjamin Franklin?
Right. Yeah, so this is a real concern. There is definitely a slippery slope here, and I do believe we'll be fighting over monuments and commemorations of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson at some point coming. But I'd sort of flip it around. If you don't think we're going to defend George Washington, there's no way we're going to defend Jefferson Davis and Roger Taney, even if we should be defending them, one.
Yeah, but
and
how
two,
do you
there's
defend
a huge,
one and not the other?
There's a huge moral and historical difference between George Washington, who fought to establish the United States of America, and Robert E. Lee, an honorable man in many ways, who fought to tear the United States apart.
But what if the standard becomes just our forefathers who were slave owners? And it could be, because that is the argument.
Yeah, well, one, I just don't think we can apply contemporary moral standards to everyone in the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries. Two, you just have to weigh their contributions. And Thomas Jefferson, I think, is a good example where his legacy on slavery is much darker than that of George Washington. But positive side of the ledger, President of the United States, author of the Declaration of Independence, founder of the University of Virginia, which I'm very attached to as an alumnus.
All very good, but he did have 150 slaves.
He did, but what about the idea that you can't just erase our history, that the only way that we can really effectively move forward is to learn the lessons from the past, because some of them were very ugly. We are where we are today, but if you just take an eraser and you forget it all, is that really where we want it to be?
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I love history. We shouldn't be erasing history. And my proposal, and it's for the localities to decide, mobs shouldn't be deciding this question, but democratically they should vote and decide what to do with the statues. And my proposal would be take them to battlefields, take them to cemeteries. Let's commemorate the Confederate rank and file who sacrificed in many cases fought with great bravery. That's appropriate. And even if these statues are no longer on the main avenue of the town and they're in a battlefield somewhere, people are going to still be fascinated with the Civil War. They're still going to read about it. They're still going to participate in reenactments. They're still going to visit the battlefields. And all that's good. I would encourage that.
Well, it's an interesting op-ed. Robert E. Lee would have wanted his statue removed. You can find that at the National Review. Rich Lowry.
Great.
Good to have you with us.
Thanks so much, guys.
All right, where in the world is Elizabeth Warren? She's not in Massachusetts with her constituents, but her Republican challenger is, and he is trying to track her down. He's joining us live next.
Is Senator Warren's Republican opponent, Massachusetts State Representative Jeff Deal. Jeff, Mr. Deal, I should say, good to see you here. So what's this all about?
Hey, Todd, thanks for having me. Well, my campaign has launched a Facebook and Twitter account that basically says, "Where's Warren?" And the thing is, Elizabeth Warren promised just a few weeks ago that she was going to spend all of her energy and time focused on Massachusetts. Clearly, based on her travel now, in fact, this last weekend she was at the Georgia Netroots very progressive convention. She's not focused on Massachusetts, and that's what we want to show people. In fact, she wrote 2 books in office. She's made $1.6 million, and she's traveled to Tennessee, Tennessee to Michigan to California a few times to New York, all to promote her books. It's very clear that she's using Massachusetts as a stepping stone, and she wants to run for president of the United States in 2020.
Well, I know your website is dealforsenate.com, and here's one of your hats right here. From a wide shot, it kind of looks like a Make America Great Again hat, but as it turns out, when you look real close, it says, Make Elizabeth Teach Again. Now, you know that the reason she is traveling all over the country is because she is a very popular member of the progressive movement, and they'd love to have her go to all sorts of places to talk about what she thinks, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she's part of this hashtag resist movement. We think in Massachusetts she should be trying to assist the American agenda and help the people of Massachusetts, but that's not what she's doing. So the hat is sort of a little play on words, a little joke there about the fact that we'd rather have her back at Harvard making $353,000 a year teaching one course rather than, and by the way, complaining about the high cost of college, rather than trying to, again, obstruct everything that's going on down in Washington.
Well, she has said that she is not running for president in 2020. You must have heard her remarks a few days ago where she says that her side of the Democratic Party, the more progressive wing, that is the heart and soul of the party. That is where she's going to double down, basically removing herself from the moderates.
Yeah, Abby, absolutely. She's talking about basically taking over the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. She's for open borders completely, illegal immigrants in sanctuary cities. She is also for free college. She is for, single-payer health care. There's not a single progressive issue she's not trying to basically own. And clearly, she's making this run for president in 2020, and again, ignoring the constituents here in Massachusetts. We have veterans, Veterans Assisting Veterans, a group that tried to reach out to her. They actually made news on your show, I believe, a few months ago. It took her 113 days before she had a staffer reach out and talk to them. These are veterans just asking for help. I think she's clearly looking at the White House. In fact, she mentioned at that Georgia Progressive Conference something about the Oval Office.
Let's talk about the Where's Warren Twitter account. Understand it was actually shut down for a time. Explain that.
Yeah, so what happened was I think a lot of Warren supporters were very unhappy with the fact that we're pointing out that she's absent here. She's a part-time senator. She wants to be a part-time author. She wants to be a part-time presidential candidate. And so I think they put a lot of complaints in to lift it. Look, I think that it's very clear across the country, and we're looking for support, like you mentioned, at that website, dealforsenate.com, to help us with this campaign. But they can also, again, weigh in at Where's Warren on Facebook and Twitter, and that Twitter account is back up.
All right, Jeff, why do you want to be a U.S. Senator, a Republican from Massachusetts? Because we've been looking in last couple of months in the U.S. Senate, it doesn't seem like the Republicans can get anything done there. You sure you want to join that club?
Of course. I was the co-chair for the Trump campaign here in Massachusetts. Very proud of helping him win a very strong primary over a lot of candidates. He won almost half the Republicans in this state. And look, I'm all about, since I've been serving in office up on Beacon Hill in Massachusetts, making sure that we cut taxes. In fact, I was the leader of a ballot question to repeal $2 billion in an index gas tax that was successful in 2014. Grow jobs, make sure that our veterans and our law enforcement are respected, and make sure that illegal immigration, sanctuary cities are a thing of the past. I want to work in D.C. to make sure that that happens.
All right, Jeff Deal, good luck to you. It's a race we'll all watch closely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
It's an interesting one to follow.
If the senator is watching, Senator Elizabeth Warren, we would love to have you on the couch as well.
Absolutely.
Consider this the formal invitation.
Yes.
Of course, we've extended it to her many, many times.
All right, more Fox and Friends just moments away.